Had we had a different outcome in the election, we might be looking at $50,000, not $100,000. So I think, we have the best of all possible worlds for Bitcoin right here. And this is like we just added kerosene to the fire, and the fire is going in one direction right now, which is up.
Yeah, when it comes to that too, I want to dig into it because there's a lot of potential reasons, not just the election that people have been talking about, not just the Senate, not just the House, the Republican sweep, but also the idea of investors waking up to Bitcoin, the reflexivity of it all as money comes in through the ETFs, as well as Monster and MicroStrategy's purchases with Michael Saylor and kind of his levered bet there. I mean, when you look at the health of this rally and kind of the speed of it, maybe some people are saying, hey, look, I missed the boat already. But that's not the case if you've watched these things play out before, I don't think. So what are you kind of advising people as they wake up to this rally?
Well, I think let's zoom out a little bit and ask ourselves right now, where is TradFi's allocation to Bitcoin? And let me put it this way. There's about 47 trillion dollars worth of stocks out there, an equivalent amount of bonds, and 5 or 6 trillion of cash out there. And just in the U.S. alone, there's $100 trillion of financial assets.
Right now, it's about, just for other context, because we have heard that, and I think it's a good way of kind of wrapping your head around how big can this get over the longer run, but just kind of giving some click points along the way as we see this rally accelerate, basically averaging about $2 billion in inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs a week now. It took gold ETFs about 5 years to get to the $20 billion in total net inflows. It took Bitcoin ETFs about 10 months. So that's 10 months versus 5 years. And Fred, I guess, the other aspect of that too, as I said, is it, begets FOMO buying and kind of the acceleration. To your point, you don't want to be the first person, you don't want to be the last person. But as we've seen, Bitcoin does go in cycles and in waves. I wonder what you make of, I guess, some of the leverage in this kind of run, and if it even matters, because,
it
potentially
doesn't matter. It doesn't
okay,
matter.
maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so I just think, look, the real, yes, there's some leverage with MicroStrategy buying a little bit of, I mean, all the amount of money that's come into this market is inconsequential relative to the amount of money that's about to come into this market. It just doesn't matter. So, again, there's these big buckets of money in the world, right? So there's self-directed people going to their stock, their portfolio, their account at Merrill Lynch and just clicking a few buttons. And that's a very small percentage of people who are going to do that. Most people, they have their assets in a brokerage account or in a bank. And, for them to wire money to this thing called Coinbase and buy Bitcoin it's a stretch. And it's even more of a stretch to tell them you got to you got to put a private, get a seed phrase, copy it down, store it in a safe, get a ledger, and hold your own Bitcoin yourself. That's not going to happen for most.
No, it's a
very
good point.
They're not going to do that.
No, it's a very good point, and I feel like also to extrapolate the point, I've been seeing your tweets recently, and one of them has to do with kind of, you're talking about investors there, but one of the biggest in terms of investors out there are countries. And, as we talked about the Republican sweep here, the U.S., suddenly the idea of the U.S. coming out with a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which Senator Lummis has floated before, and we heard President Trump endorse as well, is no longer so far-fetched. And Fred, when you consider that, I'm curious to kind of get your take on what that means for things too, because everything you just said is obviously true. A lot of people aren't going to go through all that, and it's easy to buy an ETF. But now as the U.S. potentially steps in here, I mean, how realistic is that adding, as you said, fuel to the fire here?
Well, it's 100% realistic. It's 100% going to happen. Whatever it is way too low, So that's the mental shift.
It is a mental shift, and it's a mental shift that's very difficult for people to make if they've only kind of thought about Bitcoin 10 years ago when it was still, the volatility was much higher. I think, resetting it now that you got BlackRock scooping it up by billions on the daily, it's a little tricky to kind of reset your mental framework.
Well, volatility is going to be high. It's not going down.
Yeah, let's talk about that though, because obviously we talked about long term, and I think a lot of people are in that boat. If you're a Bitcoiner, you've been in that boat for a while. But shorter term, Fred, and this is a much more difficult question, in terms of volatility being high now. I mean, how do people brace for that? Because you're saying, if this is something you could buy in an ETF, some people have this in their retirement portfolios, and it's fine. Just keep it there and forget about it. But for people who are kind of trading in the shorter term, what's Fred's call in terms of where we go? We had Sean Farrell on the show saying 115 by the end of the year. What do you think in terms of kind of shorter term? What the next few months are going to look like?
Here's the first problem is, if you think about trading Bitcoin, you're in the wrong. You've already said the wrong thing. Okay, you should not trade Bitcoin. Period. Full stop. Ever. Okay. Yeah. So the fact that you're asking about trading Bitcoin is wrong. This is probably going to be. I mean, it will be the best.
4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
For anyone, buy it and hold it for more than 4 years. And then you think eventually it takes how much, let's say it is digital gold, what percentage of gold's market cap does it finally?
Bitcoin's 0.1% of the capital in the world right now. I think it's going to go to 7% of the capital.
7%?
My long-term forecast is it's going to go to 13 million over 21 years.
13 million.
13 million, but what is it 5 years from now? In your 4-year calculus?
It's been growing 44% a year with about a 40 to 50 vol. I would think it'll move on at 40%, then click down to 35, then 30, then 25, and at some point it'll be the S&P return plus 8%, and it'll be the S&P vol plus 8%, because it's always going to be a more global, open, free capital market.
So that's what Michael said there in terms of volatility coming down eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. So I totally agree with him. Like with his, look, at some point we're going to have a tsunami of, there's a tsunami comes first, right? Which is, we get this thing in everybody's portfolios. And then the question, but I think that it's a distraction. What you really need to do is figure out the main question, which is, what percent of your portfolio is in Bitcoin? That's the number one thing right now. Mm-hmm. I really, if you already hold these coins, I would actually sell them and buy Bitcoin. Personally, I would just simplify your life. I think we as humans, we like to overcomplicate things, right?
Yeah.
We love to trade in, we trade out, we find some new story. We like this, we like that. There will be time to reassess where we are. But right now you can get really cute and you can spend a lot of your time on other stories. And yes, some of them will outperform, but a lot of them will not. And most of them will not. And I think I find it very cleansing to just have Bitcoin. I find it's like a cleansing,
Yeah, spiritually and mentally probably as well, because exactly, yes, I've dedicated a career to digging deeper into the rabbit hole, as we all. Yeah, no, I mean, look, there's a lot of people, by the way, what you're saying to someone who's not in crypto, describing Bitcoin as playing Sudoku is probably blowing their minds, because that is true. But for everybody else, I mean, this chart that we're looking at, we were talking about it this morning, Peanut the squirrel, we flagged this on Coinage when it was a $42 million market cap, now up at 1.6 billion. We got a 40 bagger, Fred, that everyone who reads our newsletter saw mentioned. In that one, I made the mistake, as you just mentioned. Sometimes we overthink things. Sometimes we overtrade. I got out. I missed the 40 bagger.
As long as you keep the position size down and you look at it as this is the fun category. I mean, it is fun. Look, when I go to Vegas, I gamble. Okay, I know I'm not supposed to. But I like to hit the tables. I like to play blackjack. I think we all do, right? And, sometimes I'll do a little sports betting. I don't care. I enjoy it. I like gambling. But I think we need to make the big bet, the big sizable bet. Mm-hmm. Let's not put your children's retirement on Peanut the squirrel, okay? that would not be a good idea. If you want to put your lunch money on Peanut the squirrel, fine, go ahead. And maybe you're going to have the thing. I don't know. they're going to fight the border. They're going to fight things like that. But I just don't see them fighting a Bitcoin reserve fund.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see. I mean, we've covered a lot of pro-crypto congressmen and women, and Richie Torres, a Democrat, perhaps one of the loudest now, getting a lot of applause from Democrats as well, saying that, look, crypto's here to stay, and he's led the charge on even challenging Gary Gensler as a Democrat. So hopefully more of that is seen here. We'll see what happens. But
yeah, and Gensler's out now, so we're about to have a changing of the guard, and it's blue skies ahead, my friend. Blue skies
ahead is a good way to wrap on this. Fred, your first appearance
Okay.
here on Coinage. Hopefully many more to come. Thank you so much